Hey nerds, it's JJ Kai Morris. Welcome to my channel where I talk about my first-hand experience as a new writer and offer some advice about what I've learned along my journey. So today I'm going to be talking about writer jargon. And so if you've been scrolling through Twitter or just reading articles or listening to maybe some master classes or YouTube videos about writing, you'll kind of hear and see some acronyms thrown around or some words and phrases mentioned that maybe you don't know what they mean. And I certainly didn't know what they mean when I first started writing. So here's a little writer vocab, if you will, of some words and phrases and acronyms that come along with writing. So first off, I'm just going to go through a few acronyms. Today I'm going to be doing part 1. I will probably do a part 2 later that covers more like the publishing industry, words and phrases and jargon. But today I'm going to mainly focus on like the craft of writing. Anyway, so I'm going to go through some acronyms. First of all, there is MC, which stands for main character, which is the main character of your story, your protagonist, your hero of the story. It doesn't necessarily need to be like a good guy or someone who's likable. It can definitely be an anti-hero, but it's the hero of the story. You may have multiple main characters depending on what you're writing, but usually there is one definite main character. Another acronym is WIP, which stands for work in progress, which is your unfinished manuscript. POV stands for point of view, and I'm going to go ahead and assume you kind of already know like the main point of view things that you learn in grade school, which is like first person versus third person. But there is actually a lot more that goes along with it. So when I have my writing meetings, I tend to talk a lot about point of view and like the different options that are available. And a lot of people actually don't know how many options there are available, especially even within writing third person. So first of all, third person can be broken down into kind of like 3 different categories. So the first is third person omniscient, and this is where the narrator can see inside the minds of every single character almost simultaneously. So they can jump from one character's inner thoughts and feelings to another character's inner thoughts or feelings without having to have a chapter break. And then there is third person limited. This is going to be where the narrator only sees inside one character's head at a time, and if the writer does go into another character's head, it's going to be separated by a chapter break or a scene break. Third person limited also is a point of view that tends to be very close inside the character's head. It shows the character's thoughts and feelings, and the whole writing is just kind of colored by their specific perception of the world. Now there is this thing called third person objective, which I just learned about recently, but it's a point of view similar to third person limited, where it's just one character's point of view, but the narrator does not see inside that character's thoughts or feelings. It's supposed to be like a neutral narrative perspective, where it does not state the character's thoughts and inner feelings, and it takes kind of an unbiased narrative perspective where the narrator only explains the facts of the things taking place without any kind of like subtle intimations of what the reader is supposed to believe or understand based on what is happening. So aside from first person and third person, there's also an epistolary way of writing a novel, and that is just a format where the story is told entirely through letters, journal entries, emails, newspaper clippings, etc. It's kind of how I look at it, as sort of like the found footage version of a novel. And some examples of this would be like Dracula or like the Lumine Files. Then there also is second person. Second person isn't used very often. Second person refers to the reader as you instead of using the pronoun I. So, for example, instead of saying I go into the woods and I see a ghost, it would be you go into the woods and you see a ghost. And it's not used a whole lot, but you're mostly going to see second person being used with like choose your own adventure type books or short stories. Okay, the next one is arc. Then there are 2 different versions of this word. One is an acronym, and it stands for Advanced Reader Copy. And this is going to be a fully finished book, completed, bound, and ready book that is sent out to readers in advance of the publishing date. And the point of this is to have some positive reviews ready to go online whenever your book is actually released. So that's an advanced reader copy. And also sometimes called an arc, which gets confusing because there's also a plot and character arc when it comes to the craft of writing. And so a plot or character arc is just the journey that the character or story takes. And so the plot arc is the physical journey, the things that actually happen and progress the story along. A character arc is the spiritual or emotional journey that the character takes, and is also kind of referred to as like the internal storyline, whereas the plot arc is more of the external storyline. To have a character arc, your character usually starts off believing or being one way and is changed by the end. Over the course of the journey, it has changed them so that they are different from where they started off. So for example, you can have a character that starts off very selfish, but by the end of the book, they end up being much less selfish or even showing signs of selflessness by the end. That's the difference between arc, for like plot and character arc, and ARC, which is Advanced Reader Copy, also called arc. Confusing, I know. Next, we have character agency. If a character has agency, this pretty much just means that the character makes decisions that furthers the plot. The actions in story that take place are a direct result of choices that the character made. So if a character lacks agency, this means that the character was just swept away by external forces and made no decisions that advance the plot. And for example, the character of Arthur in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a character who doesn't make any active choices and is really just along for the ride. He just gets swept up by the plot. And this is in direct contrast to characters that we see in most genre fiction or commercial fiction, such as Katniss Everdeen from Hunger Games. She makes an active decision to go in place of her sister for the Hunger Games. She makes the active decision to rebel against the Capitol. So her choices have the consequences that further the plot instead of her just being swept up by things that happen to her. So this is not to say that Douglas Adams made a mistake in writing a character that lacked agency. I think if you really know what you're doing with writing, you can break the rules once you know what they are. But for the most part, in general, nowadays, as a new writer, you're going to want your characters to have agency. Next up is character foil. Character foil is when you have a character with direct opposite personality and characteristics to another character. So this helps contrast some of your characters and helps bring out maybe the main character's personality by placing him next to his opposite. So, for example, in Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, Adeline is a character who is a wealthy optimist who really cares about the way he looks. This is in direct opposition to the character of Kaladin, who is a slave with serious and often very gloomy personality. So character foil can really help define a character in your reader's mind and make certain elements of their personality more pronounced. Next up, we have plot armor / character shield. These two phrases are kind of used interchangeably, but they mean the same thing. It is where the main character or supporting characters are so essential to the plot that they cannot be killed off without ending the story. By that definition, I think just about every story has a little bit of plot armor, if you look at it that way. That's not really where the negative connotation for plot armor and character shield come from. It's kind of expected that, the main character, if you're following a main character in a story, they're going to survive to the end, otherwise the book would just be over. So the problem comes when the characters survive such insurmountable odds and incredible danger and come out on top completely unscathed. So for example, the Harry Potter cannot die in the middle of the books. The series is literally named after him. If Harry Potter dies, the story is over, because Harry is the character that you are following. So this is not plot armor being taken to something that is negative. That's just expected of most stories that have a central character, versus stories like Game of Thrones, where there are so many central characters, and George R. R. Martin makes the point of killing them off quite often so that the reader has a lot of fear. So this is that was George R. R. Martin's kind of rebelling against having any sort of plot armor. But if you're following one central character, then the opinion is that they're going to survive, and at least until the very end. So the problem comes when the reader is not afraid. So for example, let's take the TV show Supernatural, which I love, by the way, but Sam and Dean have been killed off so many times, the viewers are not afraid at all if one of them dies again, because they know they're just going to be brought back to life. So the problem comes when the reader feels absolutely no suspense when the character's in mortal danger, because they know she will not be killed off. The next one, I don't know if I'm pronouncing right. It's one of those things where I've only ever read. I've not actually heard someone say this out loud, so I hope I'm pronouncing it right, but it's Deus Ex Machina. And this kind of translates roughly to God in a machine. And it refers to this contraption that was used to hoist someone up in the air as a godlike character during Greek plays, where an angel or god would come out at the end to resolve the plot. And so this, the Deus Ex Machina is an event or a being or powerful weapon that swoops in to save the characters at the last moment, seemingly out of nowhere and coincidentally. So now at times you say, okay, well, I do want my characters to be saved at the last moment, maybe by like a side character or something. That's not necessarily the Deus Ex Machina. That's not the negative thing that you want to stay away from. That's fine. That's all well and good. But problem would be is if your main character was about to fall into a river of lava and then a pterodactyl swooped in from out of nowhere and saved him, when there was never a pterodactyl introduced earlier in the story. And then the pterodactyl went away and was never introduced ever again. So to stay away from like a Deus Ex Machina, you have to foreshadow properly and you have to have something that makes logical sense instead of just having something magical or godlike coincidentally show up to get you out of the corner that you've written yourself into. And so you can't just have something random pop out of nowhere to resolve your plot. It has to make sense for the rest of the plot, and it also has to be properly foreshadowed throughout your book or somewhere prior to the big event where it shows up. And so generally the Deus Ex Machina is a plot device you kind of want to stay away from. So that brings me to my last point of plot devices, and this one kind of is similar to the Deus Ex Machina, and that is the MacGuffin. The MacGuffin is can be good or it can be bad, depending on how you use it and how you look at it. But generally, a MacGuffin is an item or object that has a single purpose in the story, and it is used to drive the plot forward. It's often used to either throw a wrench in the character's plans, or save the characters from a difficult situation, or be the thing that the character desperately wants to obtain. In my opinion, I think if a MacGuffin is used poorly, it only is a device to drive the plot forward and does not show up again at all, and is something the audience does not care about. Maybe the character cares about it a lot, but the audience could not care less about it because it doesn't mean anything to the audience, only to the characters. I think if a MacGuffin is used well, it can represent, it can stand as like a symbol for the theme of your story, and is something that the audience is definitely going to care about. Because it has a higher meaning than with a meaning for the character, it has a meaning for the reader as well. And that comes through in your theme and symbolism in your book. So these have just been a few words, phrases, and acronyms that I've seen pop up quite a bit that I didn't know what they were at first. And so I hope you maybe learned something from this video. If you need clarification on something, or if you think I misrepresented a definition of one of these words, please let me know down in the comments. I do plan on doing part 2 where I go over some more writer jargon and vocabulary. So if you have anything that you think I should include in that next video, please drop that down in the comments as well. I hope writing is going well for all of you. I want to let you all know I'm about to be published in my first magazine. This is the first time I've ever co-written a story. It's going to be featured next month in the Interesting Weirdos magazine. I will leave a link down in the description if you all want to check it out. I'm really excited for my first co-written story, and it's a little bit of horror, a little bit of weirdness. Thanks for watching, guys. Hit subscribe if you want to get notified when I do further content such as this. Feel free to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then if you want to follow my writer newsletter, then go down to the link in the description and join my reader list. Thanks for watching, nerds.